What is healing and what is dis-ease? The paradigm of healing in geometry begins with the circle or the sphere. And the point of ease is the center, the symmetry, the balance. And so when we're in symmetry, when we're in balance, in all of the various dimensions and arenas of our lives, we have a sense of ease, we have a sense of grace. And the metaphor for that is the circle. It's why we have wheels and cars. A circle can turn and stop at any point. And there's no bump, and there's no point that's harder than any other point, because it's a circle. Now, any other shape has an asymmetrical impact, meaning if you're on this flat area for a wheel, it's easy to stay there, but then it's hard to get off of the flat area if there's a lot of weight on it to go to the next flat area, which is here. And so the ease, if you take a wheel that's been crushed or elongated and you take that to a wheel shop, what they will do is they will return it to symmetry. They will return it to balance, because that's the point of greatest ease. And dis-ease, struggle, failure, pain, unnecessary suffering. We experience these to the degree that we deviate from balance. So we have a continuum of balance. And, if you think of a pendulum, it takes no effort for a pendulum to hang at the bottom point. But if you move the pendulum this way and this way, the farther you take it away from the center, the more effort you have to take. If someone is on a swing and you want to push them, you probably notice it's very easy to push them a little bit off balance, but life wants to bring you immediately back to balance. You push them the other way. It's very easy to push them a little way. But if you try and push someone on the swing 90 degrees from perpendicular, it takes more and more effort to push them off of balance. And there's more and more counterforce to come back to balance. And when you settle at the end, centered in balance, it takes little or no effort at all. It's easy. So we have health, which has some synonymous overtones with wholeness, which also ties in with symmetry and balance. Because, if you're driving on this wheel, it's a whole wheel. But if you take a slice out of this wheel, it instantly becomes more difficult to drive this car. If you take a big slice out of the wheel, this becomes an unbearably uncomfortable road. Nobody would drive four wheels like this at 70 miles an hour. And so if you cannot heal the wheel, if you cannot restore the symmetry, then you slow down and slow down again and slow down some more. It's like, this is a bumpy, painful bit here, right at this corner here. I'm going to go over, and then it falls down flat here, and it makes a bang, right? It's not comfortable. You cringe, kind of moving through a dysfunctional wheel. And so what a healer does is it makes the circle whole again. It restores the wound. The wound is the removal of part of the whole. So we have a body, we cut the arm here, we remove the hand, And now you have a dis-ease. You have an asymmetry. There's a hand on the right side, there's no hand here. There's blood flowing here, but the blood is not flowing back from there. It's not connected with the vein. You have a number of asymmetries are produced when you sever the hand. Now, it's no different on a planetary scale. We're producing carbon dioxide with our lungs, we're producing carbon dioxide with our vehicles, but we're also cutting down the trees that produce the oxygen. There's an asymmetry. We're fishing, we're removing fish from the ocean, but we're not putting more fish into the ocean. And we're removing fish faster than they have a chance to. There's an asymmetry. There's a dis-ease. And the bigger the asymmetry, the bigger the dis-ease. Because life is a journey forward. Life is a cycle, a circle, a breath, in and out, in and out. And when we do not complete one part of the cycle, we hamper the next part. If you do not breathe out fully, because you truncate, you cut the cycle, you cannot breathe in fully. If you do not breathe in fully, you cannot breathe out fully. So healing is making the circle whole again, is completing the cycle and restoring symmetry. That is what a healer does. Now, what is the diagnosis? So coming back to center, the point of grace, being at the center of a symmetrical and complete process or structure is a point of grace, is a point of healing. And that's a lot of the focus in Buddhism, is finding the center. It's also a lot of the focus in martial arts. It's finding the center. You can defend and combat an opponent more successfully if you do it from center. You will consume less energy. The more off-center you are, the more energy you have to expend. And the more energy you are expending in an off-centered position, the more energy an opponent has to use to further destabilize you, to collapse the system. And, I mean, there's so many things to say about the circle, but it takes the least amount of energy to hold its shape. You know, it's incredible. We're watching Starship, Elon Musk's creation, and, you know, to get massive amounts of weight out of Earth's orbit, we need to make the most elegant, the most slim and weightless structure that we can, but that is still capable of withstanding the 16,000 miles an hour, the turbulence of going through atmospheres, etc. And so it's not an accident that we're dealing with a perfect cylinder. So everything, every system, every process is in its way a breath, a circle. And every process, everything can become diseased, can become asymmetrical and unbalanced, and start consuming more energy than it would take to come back to center. So this is the function, this is the role of a healer. Now, the first role of the healer is to understand the circle. So if you're healing respiratory things, you have to understand the breath cycle of a human being. You have to understand what a healthy full breath looks like and a healthy exhale looks like. And you have to see where it's getting arrested. Now, ultimately, it's at the same point, but you can see like, you can see the emphasis is all on the outhale. There's no emphasis on the inhale. And it's not enough of an emphasis to be to do a really fully good job on the exhale. You have the same dynamic with selfishness and selflessness. Someone who's trying to constantly be selfless while avoiding being selfish is trying to exhale energy they don't have because they won't inhale it. You have to inhale every bit of the breath you want to exhale. You have to take in every bit of the energy you want to give away. You can't give away $1 billion if you didn't take in $1 billion. So it's and if you get attached and can't let any of that energy flow through, you will become constipated, psychologically, if nothing else. And so you have to understand what is the cycle that wants to take place. Number one, you have to understand, and it will always be a circle. If it's not a circle, you don't have a model of wholeness. If you cannot see how the circle completes itself in another generation, in information coming in, being integrated, refined, and then being given out again, breath coming in, going out. If you cannot see the circle, you cannot heal, because what you're doing is you're restoring the imbalance and the missing pieces to a cycle. Because, and this is important to understand, where does disease come from? Disease comes from the mind. Why? Well, the human mind has two teachers. One is the cult, and this is the self-referential identity, the self-referential pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that is handed down intergenerationally. And it's held in place with a number of different blocks. One of them is the law of mass. The child doesn't want to eat the food of that cult, doesn't want to speak the language of that cult, doesn't want to do the routine of that cult. The parents are bigger, and so they can just push the child along or punish them or withdraw things or challenge them or cajole them or manipulate them into doing the status quo. So the law of mass perpetuates the cult. The law of entropy perpetuates the cult. The cult is an established pattern that thousands, millions, maybe billions of people are practicing. Now, to just copy an existing pattern, if you have a wheel spinning, round and round, and you just do nothing. It'll just keep spinning, right? It'll slowly slow down, but there is an entropy of momentum. There's a momentum that says if you just copy what everyone else is doing, it takes little or no, you don't have to think, you don't have to develop anything new, you just copy it. So whereas if you say, no, that doesn't look right. I want to go off here. You guys are going here, but I want to go over here. So you had to think about that. But what's more, you're met with pressure. No, be normal, i.e. do what we're doing. So you have the law of momentum, the law of entropy. Then you also have the rationale that everyone in your cult that is still alive, meaning the pattern is not all bad, because many of the people doing the pattern are still alive, and they've been kept alive with that pattern for decades, right? So child, looks out at the world. They're all living. They've all got more money than the child. They've all got more legal status and skills. So just doing whatever they're doing is not a bad starting point. If you have to copy something, you might as well copy a living cult that is doing stuff. So there's all of that. And then there's, don't talk back to your parents, don't question the teacher, do what you're told, this is love, we know best, blah, blah, blah. You have all of that pressure. And you also depend on the cult and the family to survive. So you have all of that pressure. They meet your need to survive, to feel secure, to have love and belonging, to have outside validation, medical care, all these things. Because if they say, you're not one of us, you're not worth it, you die as a child, as an infant. So the law of the cult is the law of repetition. We did this because that's what we do. And that's what we do because we did this. And that's why we do it. That's a self-referential loop. There's nothing intelligent about that statement. But it is primarily why a tremendous amount of the things are being done today that are being done today. If you look around the cult and say, why do we imprison homeless people who are homeless because they don't have a house or an apartment, when it costs $100,000 to imprison the homeless person, but it only costs $20,000 to get them a house? That's $80,000 more per every time that gets repeated. The taxpayer pays $80,000 more, and the homeless person can't get a job that would allow them to pay back any of this because they don't have a house or they're in jail. And then when you release them from prison, they don't have a house and they don't have a job and they can't get a job from being on the street anyway. So you're just doing a 400% more expensive way of torturing your people because you couldn't figure out how to allow low-cost housing. And I'm not saying spend billions of taxpayer money to fund housing. I'm saying stop making low-cost housing illegal. What do you mean? Anyone can build a 1,700 square foot mansion and do this and sell it for $100. Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. If you cannot build a 200 square foot tiny house off grid with a composting toilet that sidesteps a lot of the bureaucracy, if that's illegal, you've just made low-cost housing illegal for someone to do on their own. If you can't sleep in a tent on your own land, you've just made low-cost housing illegal. If you can't park on a city street at night and sleep in your car or in your van, you've just made low-cost housing illegal. And there are more than 1,000 separate laws in most counties in the United States, including where I live, Marin County, that make it illegal to construct and utilize low-cost housing. More than 1,000 separate laws, each of which increase the cost of legal housing. Well, stop doing that. Stop spending public money to raise the cost of housing beyond the point where people can afford, and then spending more public money to harass the people you've made homeless, and then spending more public money to put them in jail so that they can be traumatized in jail as preparation for not getting a job when you dump them on the street after spending you fix the energy that's going into the flawed area. That's how you heal the disease. You have to understand what's causing the disease. It's always spending energy. Remember this pendulum? You're spending energy to go out of sync, which means the pendulum is going to have to swing the other way before it slowly comes back to center. So you need to be able to diagnose where you're off, where the dis-ease, where the pain, where the suffering is entering the system. And then you need to be able to find where you're spending energy to make things worse. That's the number one thing to diagnose. So here's the center of this wheel. This is a point of grace. Very little strain here. This wheel can be going 100 miles an hour, and it's still quiet. in the center. No big violent shifts because you're at the center. And so you need to find the center. And you need to find where you are in relationship to the center. So to diagnose the center, you create a competent circular model of the arena that you're in. Then you find the center. This is the point of grace. This is the point within this circle where money's going in, money's coming out. Money's going in, money's coming out. Okay, we've got grace. But here we have money coming in, but no money's coming out. Breath is going in, breath is going out. Breath is going in, but it's frozen here. You won't breathe into this feeling. Feeling up, feeling down. Feeling up, feeling down. But you won't feel this down. So you're stuck here. You won't go down into this feeling. And so you can't come up into this feeling. I don't want to feel it. I'm dissociative. So that's the point of the interrupted circle. I was born, I'm growing, I'm growing, I'm growing, now I'm dying, now I'm dying, now I'm dead. That's a circle. I'm growing, I'm growing, I'm growing. I don't want to get any older. That's a disease. If you're in the middle of a circle and you decide to fight life, the disease is in the head, first of all. I don't want to feel that. I don't want to breathe that. I don't want to see that. I wrote this letter. This is the reply. I don't want to see the reply. No, I don't want to, whatever. I want to cut that off. I don't want to deal with that, right? So that's the disease, right? The interruption of the circle. You need to know what the circle looks like. I say something, I'm listened to fully and completely. You say something, and I listen fully and completely. I say something and listen, you listen fully and completely. That's the cycle. That's a good cycle. And a good cycle includes honoring and working with each point in the cycle. It's not I said something, you ignored it, then you said something and I ignored it. It's a circle. It happens, repeats back and forth many times, and nobody hears each other. But it's not as graceful a circle. It's that's more of a line. You say something, I ignore it. I say something, you ignore it. The circle is you say something, we let it in. It affects us. We respond to it. We feel about it. We move through it. We understand it. Then we give it back to you. So it's a more competent circle. Now, once you've created the model, first of all, understand that every mental model is flawed. So you're creating a rendition of a circle that is as circular as you can get with your limited understanding. No human being can understand the circle because it is an infinite number of dots, an infinite number of lines that is being presented as this synergy, this one. But because there's no language in just one, it's unconscious. It's perfect, but it's unconscious. It's beyond human consciousness, the perfect one. The interconnected ecology of all things being connected is ephemeral. It's transcendent. It's beyond what language can grasp, and we experience the world in language. So you're getting as close to the circle as you can. We can understand in-breath, out-breath. That's just a polarity, But everything is, in fact, moving in this circle. And the next thing to diagnose, now what is a diagnosis? So you start with a circle, and let's say you run a line here. That's maybe one point, and then you run another line here. And where these two lines intersect is the diagnosis. You're looking from multiple different angles, and what you're trying to find is a convergent point, in this case of stuck energy. The blood is flowing out of the hand, it's severed, blood is flowing out, it's not flowing back. So the diagnosis is you look for asymmetries. This person is getting a lot of value from the relationship. This person is getting negative value. Every day this person is in this relationship, they feel worse. Every time this person is in this relationship, they feel better. So why is that happening? It's because the relationship is not symmetrical. It's probably a relationship between a narcissist and a self-punisher. So, but then you can split hairs and say, well, if a self-punisher is looking for a way to punish themselves and the narcissist is looking for someone to use, then they're both winning, right? And so within the human brain, you could say, yeah, they're both winning, because if you take away the one person from the self-punisher, they will find some other way to punish themselves, just drink some more or do this and that if they need to punish themselves. And so then you say, well, so the disease isn't just in the relationship, the disease is in the inner dialogue. And then you look at where's the asymmetry and where does it start? What's the origin of the dis-ease? You go back to childhood, for example, and you find this pattern where a parent hits the child and says, you're no good. Now, the child, putting their parent up on a pedestal in a dependent relationship where they require the parent to survive, feel secure, the child copies the parent. They don't return the compliment, right? Because if a parent hits a child and says, you're no good, the symmetry would be to slap the parent and say, fuck off, you incompetent shithead of a parent. Get the fuck out of my space. I'm 5 years old. Life doesn't create 5-year-old mistakes, but life and this cult does create incompetent parents. So now you'd give the pain back to the parent, and they might say, gee, that's not working very well. Maybe I'll try talking or whatever. But that's not what happens. When a giant, who's relatively speaking, weighing 2 tons and 30 feet tall relative to our physical weight, that's what it feels like when a child, 5 years old, is hit by a parent. When a giant hits the child and says they're no good, there's a part of the child that says, I'm no good and I deserve to be punished. So that's an imbalance. The giant, rather than protecting the frailty of the child, is loading on weight. And the child, rather than defending and saying, hey, why are you picking on me? I'm 5 years old. If I'm that fucked up and you're my parent, maybe look at your parenting skills. You know, that would be healthy. Why? Because it would return things to wholeness. The parent, the giant, is trying to dump and concentrate and scapegoat a helpless kid. It's incredibly incompetent. It's not symmetrical, other than with the abuse pattern, because what that usually means is that parent was abused similarly. So you have a symmetry in passing on an abuse, but it's not as healthy as a true symmetry, where an adult doesn't dump all of their garbage onto a 5-year-old. And if they do, the 5-year-old doesn't take it on. But you can see that in child psychology, the sexually abused boy hates themselves, feels unlovable, believes they're fundamentally bad. And that's why someone sodomized them. Now that's the core dis-ease. Dad was incompetent. Uncle was incompetent. Both were sociopathic. Both exploited the vulnerability of the child to dump their disease, their imbalance, onto an innocent child. And the symmetry is restored in giving that back. Going in there, see, because the child didn't have an advocate. So that's where the healing, the restoration to center comes back. No, Dad, you deal with that. If you can't deal with it, then have the decency not to give it to a 6-year-old. Go find a therapist. See if you can find an adult in this cult that raises so many children in grown bodies. See if you can find an adult and give it to them, not a 6-year-old innocent, right? And so that's moving towards healing because it's moving towards symmetry. You have to find the area in the life pattern where there is a profound imbalance. And then you must apply medicine. What kind of medicine? Whatever kind of medicine brings this point that's over here back to center. That's the kind of medicine. So what could that medicine be? Could it be a walk? Sure. Could it be shouting? Sure. Could it be hitting a pillow? Sure. Could it be a psychedelic compound that helps you go back in time and look at it as an adult and say, oh my goodness, my 5-year-old thought I did something wrong because I was raped. Poor kid, no one was there for him. I'm going to step in and be there. I will be the parent for that now inner child. And I'm going to teach that child how to stand up, how to get help, how to leave the reality. I'm going to teach that child to shift the dynamic, and I'm going to be their advocate. Now you have medicine. Because there you had the giant exploiting the child, now you have the giant protecting the child. You're coming closer to center. There you had the child that couldn't talk back, and the giant could blabber on. Now in meditation, now in work, in whatever the context is for replaying the dynamic. It can be constellation therapy, it can be imagining, it can be video games, it can be new projections. But now, shut the fuck up, abusive parent. I have something to say. No, don't talk back. Shut the fuck up. It's my meditation. Put some duct tape on the abuser. You're going to listen to what I have to say. It's medicine if it brings symmetry. If you're terrified and you can't stand up for yourself, then doing the things that help you stand up for yourself is medicine. Now, it's very common for diseases to flip, for the abused victim to become the perpetrator, because it takes talent and skill to come back to center, to where you were not and are not being abused, rather than becoming the abuser. Because when you're abused, for example, you feel small, you feel valueless, you feel hopeless, you feel terrified, you feel despair, because no one is advocating for you. And that's the incompetence of the cult. You know, not anyone in this cult will advocate for a 6-year-old? No one? Well, I mean, let's not blame that on the 6-year-old. Let's question whether or not the passivity of accepting an education without a single bit of psychology, without a single bit of intergenerational abuse studies, is intelligent. And if it's not intelligent, then let's question the giants that are ramming this stuff down a kid's throat. Don't ask a kid to be more competent and intelligent than you are. Protect the child from your own stupidity and from the stupidity of the giants that came before you. How about that? You know, that's being an adult. So you need to come back to center, which means you've got to lift all that fear up and stuff and give it back to the abuser. Now, you can also work with a higher power, or you can bring in other dynamics. The key is you've got to get the abuse to go back to not be a terrified victim. Now, at the point where you succeed in that, you will feel powerful. A powerful person doesn't bully. A powerless person that never got out of that and is stuck there will bully, so that they will not feel so alone. See, the bully is saying, I'm stuck in a wound of being abused by a bully, usually the father. But it can be the mother, but it's the abusive masculine in the male or the female. Now, when that's not dealt with, the bully is left alone in terror and feeling small. And nobody is paying any attention because it's an incompetent cult. So their goal is to induce that same state in other people with one of two objectives. One is just to know that the other person is feeling the same way, so they're not alone. The bully and the victim have a very strong bond, just like the torture victim and the torture inflictor. There's a very strong bond, because the one who's administering the pain understands the pain, particularly if they're a good torturer. They understand all of the pain very, very well, and they live it with them vicariously through mirror neurons. There's a bond through pain. But if you give that back, now you're in the center point. Now you can walk out. If you flip, now you're in a new prison, because first you hated, and that was a villain and wanted revenge and all that. But now you're the hated one and don't deserve, and will need to be someone will need to take revenge on you. It's these symmetries, flip on both sides. But if you want to interrupt that cycle, that intergenerational cycle, that bullying cycle, for example, you have got to help the victim in their terror to come effectively back to center. Now the disease has been healed. The dis-ease has been healed because you're in the state of grace, you're in the state of the center. So that's what healing is. Now, you have two levels of healing. The one is suppressing the symptoms. So you're out of whack. Let's say everyone blames you and you blame yourself. That's a pretty sick system, right? Everyone scapegoats you and you scapegoat yourself and you take it all on and say, I'm so sorry, it's all my fault. So no one's taking any responsibility. They hired you. They trained you. They chose you. They're still giving you the job. They're not doing anything better. They're not helping out. They're doing all that, and it's all your fault? I mean, this is a completely fucked up system. The entire circle is able to respond. But if they're not responding, preferring to blame one person, that's a scapegoat phenomenon. It's not real. That's psychological transfer. Everyone there needs to have a victim that goes through terror and stuff and lives out the unspoken shadow of the community wound. So they're just setting you up to play that role. Well, if you say, it's all my fault too, you're part of the disease. That's why they picked you. You were an easy target. They abused you. You said, it's all my fault, I deserve it. So they abused you some more. I mean, you said, it's all my fault, you deserve it. And everyone said, oh, thank goodness, we have a scapegoat. We have someone who will take the entire collective stupidity and pretend that it's all their fault. And we'll pretend it's their fault. Why? Because we're lazy. We don't want to do the work. We don't want to own that I could have done this. I could have trained you better. I could have picked another person. I could have hired another person. I could have done this. I could have helped you here. I could have helped you deal with your childhood issues. Your teacher could have helped you deal with your childhood issues. Your parents could have not abused you in the first place to set you up to be the scapegoat and feel comfortable with it. Everyone could have helped. But that would have taken some thought, some intelligence, some care, some love, so we didn't. And we're just leaving this asymmetrical system. So if you're trying to heal a group dynamic and all of the blame for all of the problems is all coming to one person, well, I mean, you can certainly look at and you can look at that dynamic, examine, so if it is truly the case that the entire operation is bottlenecking around one person, why is that person in the job? Because they're not in that job on their own. So do you have an incompetent boss? Now, if you're all working for an incompetent boss, why are you doing that? Okay, so you're afraid of getting fired. So you're all enabling the incompetence of the boss, who thinks they're competent, who's hired the wrong person. And you're all living in fear of being fired. And so you're all adding your fear into the issue and you're not challenging the authority. And you think it's all one person's problem? You fucking moron? Give them a break. It's every single person's point on the circle. The boss, those that enable the boss, you for choosing that company, the culture for raising such incompetent people, you for not challenging the fact that your kid is going to grow up in a high school that doesn't teach psychology? Really? The study of the self, the source of all of our reality, you're not going to study that? Too much effort in the history of wars and names of bridges and all that? I mean, this is so incompetent that it is absurd to rant on any one person. So we're all part of the cult, basically. And yet, that's the science, that's the truth. And yet, the cult likes to hide certain facts and amplify other parts to create what? A distorted view of reality. So you have the ecological reality, and then you have the distorted reality of the cult, where the cult pretends that the wheel doesn't go out here and doesn't go out here, and it pretends that it goes out here. When you look through the view of your cult, what the cult says is healthy is always sick, always. The norms of every single cult in human history are sick. They're diseases because they produce unnecessary suffering due to chronically maintained asymmetries. Men are better than women. What a piece of crap. There's no science to support that. Oh, but men can throw baseballs faster. And complete the circle, that man that threw a baseball faster, where did he come from? A woman. So you're telling me that the golden egg is more valuable than the goose that laid it? Pretty fishy logic. But cults are renowned for this bullshit. They lie constantly. Oh, yes, men are better than women, says the cult. This God is better than that God, says the cult. Money is better than caring, says the cult. Complete and utter nonsense, continually. So you've got to diagnose your cult and then create a model of symmetry that is scientific, where you look at a scientific model that is healthy and sustainable, is a synergistic ecological model, where this part benefits this part more than this part is taxed by this, and this part benefits this part. It's like trees and human beings. Human beings are benefited by trees in a healthy relationship, and trees are benefited by humans in a healthy relationship. Now, if that's the healthy exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide and shade and weather and all that. Now, if a human being destroys too many trees and starts to breathe poorly, like the 4 million people every year that die of respiratory complications, smog, this and that, well, it's a sick system, because all those humans are frenetically working in the city in things that invariably result in trees being cut down. The very trees that they need to clean their air that aren't there because they've concentrated a toxic amount of carbon dioxide release, but they haven't brought in the balance. And that's called civilization. That's called modern. That's called advanced. It's called fucked up is what it's called. You couldn't even manage the air circle. And you're all advanced because you've created violent video games? I mean, thank goodness the characters in your video games don't die because they don't have an oxygen, good oxygen. All those superheroes, thank goodness they don't have asthma, right? Because you just didn't include that in the system. That's what a cult is. It just doesn't include large swaths of data. And you have a cult, which is perpetuated, that is asymmetrical, that is sick. And once you've got a sick cult, your ecology and your science is always healthy if it's not cult-based, if it's not politics-based. But once you've got a sick cult, and you've got to look at the ecology, not your cult, because your cult is what made you sick. Your cult sickened your mind by telling you that thinking was more important than feeling. Really? Really? Every single human action in the history of humanity has been emotionally based? Not worth a few hours of instruction? How dumb do you have to be? As dumb as our cult. That's how dumb you have to be to focus on half of the equation and ignore the other half. So you start with creating a healthy, realistic model. Heart, mind, body in symmetry. That's intelligent. Then you go into the cult, and you see 90% of all the education and energy is mind, and then 2% is emotional, and then you have this physical stuff here. You say, wait a minute, I thought heart, mind, and body were equally important. Well, they are. So why is the cult teaching 90% mental stuff and no emotional literacy and just a little bit of physicality? Because it's a sick cult. So you can't heal people in a sick environment. You got to get them out of the cult environment and into a healthy one. So the diagnosis is really about the cult and the environment. Ultimately, the statistics are produced by the cult, not the individual. Now, an individual can fight the statistics. You know, even in Vegas, there are a few people that walk away richer than they went in. So if you want to go into Vegas with a 99% chance of losing all your money, placing 100 bets, and know that you might be one of the 1% that leaves with more money, be my guest. It's just stupidity. When you could play a game where 99% of people walk away with more money. It's called getting a job. 99% of people who get a job walk away with more money. 99% of people who go to Vegas go away with little or no money that they went into. So this is that's the difference between being, well, I'm going to get lucky. See, idiots try and enter a dysfunctional cult that's rigged against them and be the one winner. Nobody's really getting happy working long hours at a job they don't like so they can get money. But I'm going to be the one person who's going to be happy doing that. Well, you could do this, could do that. No. I'm gonna get my game up, right? I'm gonna get my game up, and I'm gonna be that 1% that walks away with more money from Vegas. And so, the smart people play a game that is rigged in their favor. Warren Buffett says competition, free market enterprise, those are for losers. They want a monopoly. They want a moat. They want to invest in something that they have a statistical odds of winning. Credit cards, for example. They love, Buffett loves Wells Fargo with all their predatory credit card scams because it's rigged in the bank's favor. And an investor knows that. And so I'll put bets on that as opposed to putting a bet, I'm not going to invest something that's good for the people where they get more and more money and we don't. That'd be rigged in the opposite favor. And then you have this, but you have this point where it can be in everyone's interest, but for that, it has to be a sustainable circle. And for a sustainable circle to be held in whatever arena it is, you need an initiator, you need a witness, and you need a recipient. So there's, in any dynamic, like let's say a teacher abuses a student. The teacher has to decide to abuse the student. The student has to accept the abuse. Most of the time, the kid could get up and run away or say, fuck you or whatever, and I'm not taking your crap. They could. But mostly, they've been indoctrinated into saying nothing. But they could not take the abuse. And then the majority, the rest of the students, are all watching this. And they could all stand up and say, no, we're not letting you shame another one of us. We're not going to abuse you. We're not going to try and get you fired. But no more shaming because someone doesn't have a good memory. Is it a deal? Or do we need to get you out of this position? Because this person is doing their best to learn your ridiculous subject, and we're not going to stand up for your shaming someone who's got memory issues, they've got traumatic history. I know you're too dumb to understand that because they don't teach trauma in school and they don't teach trauma to teachers, which is an act of cruelty. And I know you're too dumb to understand that. But we're not going to put up with you as an authority person shaming our students. So is this, if we step out a little bit, maybe you hear a little bit of hint of rage, a little bit of anger in there. How much abuse of parents and teachers and authority has to go on before it's medicinal to shove a little bit of this back to the cult? And there's some release, there's some medicine. Why? Because so few people advocate for the child. The child is not a helpless person in this dynamic. It's just they're ganged up on by incompetent people who are so incompetent they don't understand their incompetence. Now, if it's horrific for a teacher, they shouldn't have to hear this, or a parent, oh my gosh, this is so uncomfortable. Well, just imagine what it's like to go through your torment as a 6-year-old in relationship with giants with no one who will back them up. Which is worse, right? A little bit of discomfort for a few parents and teachers and maybe an insight or two, or another generation of tormented 6-year-olds. My sense is the cult is way too concerned with itself and not as concerned enough with its people. So my medicine is my disgust and anger back at a system that would do that, because that seems closer to center. It's not perfect medicine. This would be toxic in another situation. So Everything is an energy pattern that can move a system one way or another, and that's what healing is. Take the culture out of the room. Cultures are always sick. Understand the cycles that are present. Understand what symmetry looks like. What does the perfect circle look like? Find the center. Locate where you are by looking at multiple data points that all reveal the pattern. So here's where you are. All these data points are saying you're here. Where you need to be is here. Now, medicine is a force that propels you in this direction and gets you back to center. Can anger be medicine? Sure. Can rage be medicine? Sure. Can teaching be medicine? Sure. Can forgiving be medicine? Anything can be medicine if it is moving the dynamic. Basically, in the physical expression, if your car is wobbling violently because your hub is here and your wheel is here, every time you're going, it's an incredibly, you get out and you look at it. You say, I bolted the wheel on in the wrong place. I should have bolted it on right here. This is going to cause problems forever. Every movement is going to be diseased. There's going to be dis-ease in this drive until we get to here. Whatever you do to do that sustainably is medicine for the drive. And what you're returning to is grace. You're returning to wholeness through diagnosis and remedy and medicine and rebalancing, so that the sustainable pattern of life, that is what life is teaching us constantly. You see, life took no energy at all 24 billion years ago, according to the current story, and poof, had something the size of a pea. And life has been working with that energy, the size of a pea, for the last 24 billion years. And out of nothing, out of something the size of the pea, life, using the science of sustainability, the science of ecology, the awareness of the circle, the dynamics of synergy, the ultimate scientist, right? Life has been creating more and more things out of nothing. 10 billion years ago, this planet didn't exist. We certainly didn't exist. Now we do. How? Because life created that. Life gives birth to more and more life. So life has a pretty good system. Now cults, on the other hand, the root word of culture, cults die out right and left. Anthropologists tell us there have been 10,000 cults in human history. 95% of all those cults are now dead. They're extinct. They failed to do what they said they would do, which was to be the best and only way of doing things. Every cult says that to its people. 95% of them are dead. Do you want to listen to your cult, or do you want to listen to life? Life is still here 24 billion years later. 95% of all the cults are extinct. So if you build your circle based on life, the in-breath and the out-breath, the in-breath and the out-breath, and find your cult and yourself on that circle. Usually there's a tension. What the cult wants is a sick person that conforms to the cult. What life wants is a healthy person that is in grace at the center. You have your cult, you have the data. You have the cult, you have life. You have your cult, and you have the ecology around you. So you want to build your model from life. It's a winner. I mean, any investor envies and should envy life, because any investor doesn't come close to taking nothing. Every investor starts with at least $1. Life started with nothing. And now we have multiverses. Who do you want to listen to? Your cult that went bankrupt again? Oh, the government ran out of money. Because your government is your cult. They're running on self-referential math. They're not listening to reality. Of course, another one went bankrupt. Oh, what a surprise. Cults are going bankrupt, going extinct. There's a 95% statistic. Should you learn nothing from them? No, learn from them. The cult can teach you a lot if you understand that it is innately flawed and want to come back to life itself, to the larger geometries. When your cult is paying you money to cut down trees and your kid has an asthma attack, you can take the money or you can plant some trees. The cult will reward you for taking the money. Life will reward you for planting the trees. And so a lot of the challenge, if you're a cult member, is to transcend the cult, to learn through it, understand its many diseases and dysfunctions, and then outgrow it. Become independent so that you can do the intelligent things that no one in your cult will understand or reward you for, because they're intelligent, which is to deviate from the asymmetry of your cult. The cult will make you sick, but it will keep you alive until you have, hopefully, an initiatory adulthood experience, at which point you can go out there and start to learn from a much wiser teacher, which is life. All knowledge begins with a paradigm, and out of that paradigm comes an idea, an awareness that we adopt, reject, or synthesize into something better. It doesn't become wisdom, it doesn't become useful until we take action, until we integrate it into not only our thoughts, but our feelings, our body, our words, and our way of being. For that to occur, we have to move from the passive media paradigm into more active engagement. In the link below, in the More Information section, is an invitation to join a very small, deliberately filtered, high-quality discussion with a group of people who share a common language and want to work with these ideas, with me and with one another, with the sole goal of creating 10 times more sustainable well-being for ourselves and those around us per unit of energy invested. Thank you for watching.